Okay. Overall, we looked at social sustainability challenges that each organization and their leader is facing. Their leaders are facing. We talked about the big pivot from this model to this model, right? At some point you get sick of the toast and the bagel. And I think it's good to just keep reminding ourselves of the metaphors that can help guide this very complex process of adapting and shifting and solving these large system level challenges, whether they be environmental or social. And we're looking at chapter 4 now with Shay and with Mimi to understand what are these elements of a shift. They concern strategy, how you see your organization operate in the world. They concern leadership. They concern how you govern an organization, how you motivate people that work with you, etc. So it's a question of a mindset. It's a different paradigm. And so just looking at chapter 4, what resonated with you, if anything, there? Maybe also reflecting back on your own job experience, etc., what kind of organization you're part of, and whether or not it's already pivoting or not.
I think the biggest thing for me is that in order to achieve this big pivot, it does, of course, start from the leaders and the leadership perspective. And that essentially trickles down to the employees and things of that sort. And in order to kind of empower and encourage employees from a leadership standpoint, you have to give them a sense of ownership, kind of like just passing on the baton of responsibilities. That essentially creates because there's a more social responsibility, they feel like there's a level of importance that they need to achieve and they need to accomplish, and that kind of trickles throughout the entire organization. So I think it's kind of like when you know that there's a level of importance of what you're doing as ultimately with the goal that you want to achieve, I think employees will be more encouraged and more motivated to kind of thinking outside of the box and kind of, essentially doing something better than they originally thought in the beginning. So I think, ultimately in order to, to kind of achieve this pivot, it starts with leadership, upholding those values, and then kind of trickling that down to the employees and giving them a sense of ownership and responsibility.
Anything that
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think once companies pivot, it'll be very easy to get humans and employees to give you the more that you want, because now they're feeling that they're a part of something, that they're creating something of bigger value than just money. So I think, as we were talking about previously, the big pivot actually benefits companies in the long run. Yes, it might have higher capital expenditures in the upfront, but in the long run, your employees will actually want to be more productive because there is so much more to give, because the more is better for humanity, it's better for the world, it's better for everyone here, like any species living here, and it's leaving a better world than what we got. So I think that the big pivot, while hard to do, especially from a leadership standpoint, because you're so used to just reporting to one stakeholder, which are your shareholders, in the long run benefits everyone.
And if we recall this statement on the purpose of cooperation that the Business Roundtable issued in 2019, August, they basically say we need to do a big pivot, right?
Exactly.
And we need to honor dignity and all stakeholders in the meaning of life that they create, and hard work and creativity to lead a life of meaning and dignity. That's not necessarily language that you typically associate with leaders in tough corporate America jobs, right? And yet, this is what the language is that they're using right now. And I think the big pivot is a shift in thinking, a shift in talking, a shift in language, a shift in the narrative, the story that they share. And what it means is like, okay, we can and need to be part of the solution. Any organization, right? Whether they're business CEOs or they are governmental leaders, including presidents, prime ministers, etc., and or NGO leaders. People get excited when they're part of the solution of something, right? When you solve a problem, what happens in your brain?
You're thrilled.
You're thrilled, you're excited, right? It's like, wow, you're elated, yes? And then the question is, what kind of problem you want to solve? Because the more you solve problems, and important problems, the more engaged you will be. the more excited you will be. That's what speaks to this leadership. Leaders that are inspiring and inspired, they're working on these big issues. They're not working on the small issues. They're not working on getting more. That's like dry bread, right? This is like, who cares? Like, who is excited about creating more shareholder value for somebody that you don't know? We don't even know who the shareholders are, right? Because most of the time they are algorithms and computers. They're not even people. And so this is getting increasingly abstract. It's like meaningless to most people, including the leaders. And so nobody can authentically represent why they're doing what they're doing, other than sort of come up with sort of nice statements that are on the webpage that, as you said, you don't really buy into anymore. That's why you switch companies.
Right.
So leadership in that sense is actually empowered possibly by this shift, by this possibility of a pivot, right? You guys feel empowered when you sort of go into organizations that maybe showcase a little bit more of that we're part of this solution. Whatever problem is out there, right? But there are many existential problems that we're facing right now, so it's easy to pick and choose one. So most of the data that we have is people feel super excited working for an organization that is meaningful to them, that solves a meaningful problem to people, right? This is so intuitive. This is so clear, right? So why do not more leaders do it?
Because they've been, I think, programmed to care about your shareholders for so long. It's all about shareholder profit and maximizing profit. And it's very hard to change an entire corporation for a different drive and goal. While they may say that they want to solve climate change, it's really hard to change a global corporation into that actual set, that trickles down. And a leader can say something, but do you have the infrastructure in place to actually do the change? And I think that's really where push comes to shove, is say it and then build the infrastructure to do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times with leaders, they focus more so on short-term goals, so they don't really value the long-term goals and what that can in result return. So I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
The short term as sort of one reason why leaders aren't doing more of what we say is intuitive.
Like what they want to invest in. But in the long run, essentially so it does cost money to, be more efficient, eco-friendly, things of that sort. But in the long run, that investment, they can essentially, get a return on their investment, but they don't really think about, a lot of leaders don't essentially think about the long term. It's more so of the short term. And so I think that's why it's kind of hard for leaders to make that decision of, making these bigger decisions that ultimately, ties into numbers, financially wise. They don't want to invest because they don't really see it in the present, as far as the results and of what their money is essentially going to.
And so therefore, in some ways, many things need to shift. That's why it's a big pivot, right? This is why it's a big shift. It's a paradigm shift, because we need to reevaluate what we value, what we invest in, what we think the future should be, right? And this does take a lot of courage. This does take a lot of sort of insight. And it is almost always too much to be asked of one leader. So there is what Andrew Winston calls this radical collaboration. There's a need for radical collaboration. Every time humanity has faced existential problems, we only solved it through collaboration. Division of labor, it's a killer in terms of evolutionary survival strategies, right? It's like, if we can't learn to collaborate, if CEOs can't learn to collaborate, they're probably not going to solve this problem, because those problems are so large. They impact every organization. Every organization can be part of the part of the solution. Yet people need to learn how they're part of a system, right? You need to work with the stock exchanges. You need to work with the rating agencies. You need to work with the governments. You need to work with the investors. All of those need to sort of figure out a way to say, we're going to invest here. We're going to look at those companies that are shifting from this model of maximization to this model of having a planet where everyone can thrive.
And I think it also goes back to perfection as well. Leaders are afraid to make a mistake. They think, that they have to be perfect in everything they do. And that actually ties back into the exercise that we had earlier today when you said that it's okay to make a mistake. We end up, coming up with a storyline that was way more interesting than if we were to be within those limits of, having to be perfect and things of that sort. So it's okay to, I think essentially what it is when leaders feel like they want to be perfect, that actually, it kind of,
it threatens.
yeah, and they're not able to really think beyond what their normal thinking is. So I think it's more. It has a lot to do with being more open and being more. I guess you would say, just accepting and understanding other, like taking other ideas from people and things of that sort to kind of make this bigger. Decisions when it comes to just like perfection and things of that sort.
So what we're referencing here is also the creativity of human beings, right? We have enormous creativity. We're creative at solving all kinds of problems, sometimes trivial problems like a Sudoku, but this sort of, it gives us some juice. We like it. We like trivia quizzes, right? Those are trivia quizzes because they solve trivial questions. And there are bigger questions out there that we feel excited about solving, that we could solve. And the fear of sort of stepping outside of something, of some comfort zone, for many leaders is what potentially prevents them of engaging in those kind of questions that are beyond understanding, right? No one leader will have the solution, okay? And the current model, the economistic model, oftentimes assumes that the top boss knows all the answers. And it used to be a workable model for the past when we sort of said routines work. Anybody who is an expert should be on top. They can guide us because they have been there. For example, like a mountain climber that has gone to Mount Everest several times is probably going to be a good leader for somebody who's never been there. So they should be in charge. But what if the mountain is something that we have never explored? We have never been there. We've never been in a situation like we are right now as a species. So many issues. Nobody has really the solution, the one solution. So it really requires a different kind of leader. In this humanistic model, you can think about it's like, okay, we need a person that can balance their four drives and the drives in other people. They create community, they can create a sense of purpose, they can create something that allows people to sustain their existence by the drive to acquire, and they need to feel safe. When we have that in the mix, we can be creative. We can really have our brain work in our favor to innovate and to create solutions to the bigger problems. So in that humanistic shift, that big pivot towards a different kind of leadership, you'll sort of see a lot of possibilities where you say, you know what, we can go this route, we can go this route. Most likely we're going to have to do it in collaboration. There is no one expert that can tell us where we need to go. And when we do it together, when we organize as a group, as a community, we can probably get there. More likely that we get there than if we depended on one person only. Okay, so this is just touching some of the superficial insights that we could gain, and I think it shows how rich it can be when we shift the way we think about ourselves, about the practices that come from that, and then how we can actually be part of the solution as managers, as employees, as anybody who is part of the societal organizing process, which means everyone, right? So I thank you for the conversation. I challenge you, students, to think more about this. And until next time.